Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds of community. Fill us with your grace as we make decisions that affect everyone in our school system. Give us the grace that we may do our parts as public servants. Amen. Amen. Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Announcement and acclamations.
I don't have any announcements today.
Okay. Southern Spirit, employee of the month.
Okay, our Southern Spirit employee of the month this month is Ms. Wendy Frederick. Many of you, the board, rely on Ms. Wendy a lot. You call her and ask her for things, and she gets it for you. She puts up with me on a daily basis. That deserves a plaque every day. So she's also very organized, and I'll tell you, as one of the traits of a good secretary, a good executive secretary, is she screens out a lot of calls. She knows the answer to things, probably answers them better than I would. So it lightens the load on me and on the rest of the staff when she can do those things. She's very efficient. She's here all the time. She answers calls after hours when I need something and takes care of things just like that. So Ms. Wendy, very well deserved. Thank you.
My turn?
Yes, sir.
Most of you know this about Wendy. But I don't, that's my memory, she didn't apply for the job. She was appointed for the job, didn't know that she was going to do the job. And I know that, how has it been, 10, 12, 15 years? She's done a super job. And the reason it happened is, in those days, we didn't have Act 1. We didn't want to Act 1. But a previous superintendent appointed an executive secretary when Melissa quit abruptly. The ex-superintendent hired someone, she lasted 2 or 3 days, hired another one after 3 weeks. And then I think Fred the one who made the motion.
It was Frederick.
I'm glad that we picked the right person, and to me it proved that there's something wrong with Act 1.
Oh, yes. Say thanks, Wendy, for well done job. Very good job. Always knowledgeable. Is there any additional deletion to the agenda? Mr.
Yes, Mr. Budget, you guys would consider, because we would like to get this done for the end of the year, consider and approve a proposed settlement with the Second Injury Fund, Louisiana Second Injury Fund, for one of our employees. We could have that for executive session.
Okay, we need a motion to add that to the motion. One by Ms. Weeks, second by Ms. Cody. Vote, all in favor? And nay. Motion is carried. There'll be an executive session, item D. Oh, okay. Is there any items to be removed or discussed on the consent agenda? If not, then we're going to.
Richard,
Yes,
can
sir.
you be a little bit louder? Which one?
The consent agenda. If you have any items that need to be removed, to discuss before we vote on the entire, consent agenda from A to F.
Well, yeah, I just have simple questions. Why are we changing it from guidance council to school council?
The legislature changed it.
Okay, let's finish with that, and then consulting services to purchasing policy.
That's again a state law. They've allowed you to hire a consultant for purchasing if you want to.
No.
Just put it in policy.
You need a motion?
Motion is that.
Motion by Mr. Cody. Second by Mr. Amen. Vote. And the name, motion carried. Okay. Finance Committee recommendation. Consider or recommend action regarding to, conservation to activity.
That's the item for Bruce Over.
We're gonna vote on all items and then.
Motion to accept the, finance committee recommendation.
Wait, except item C.
Wait, hold on.
Item C, was moved by the superintendent.
Item B, I will discuss item B on the finance committee. All right,
Okay, you want to discuss the
Sure.
finance, so the next finance, we're supposed to have a finance, committee meeting at least twice a year.
And he wants to
No, you want to
discuss,
talk about it right
he
now.
wants to discuss B tonight instead of having it voted on to the.
Okay, go ahead.
I did say in finance committee that I was going to vote no in finance, but I was going to discuss it in the regular board meeting. I want to explain why I voted no.
We can't get that.
It's ready?
Oh, yeah, you can hear me.
All right. First of all, finance committee, the Head Start hasn't picked. I don't know if, and I probably never met the lady, but there's a Mrs. Tangy or Tangy. Is she here today?
No.
Because honestly, I think she would be my recommendation for employee of the month. Because I read a little bit of what she did in the meeting. And it kind of reminded me of an old advice my attorney gave me years and years ago. He said, if you have a bulldog in your yard and it escapes, and how it's dangerous, you have a 50-50 chance of winning in court. But if you put a sign in your yard that says, vicious dog, and it escapes, there is no way you're going to win because you have admitted that you're guilty. Now, here's what Ms. Danger implied, said, very well. Be aware of hazard pick. We are admitting that there's a possibility that's down the road, admitting that there may be suits involved, and I agree with that. Any other way, I probably would have agreed, any other pay that was acceptable, accepting hazard pick. We are admitting that there's a possibility things down the road. So, now, there's also, and I might say a few things, there are other things, including, what is it, 4B, 5B, and 6C, I might be saying a few things, I don't want to repeat it during Mark's presentation. But I have been reading Constitutional lately, and I've really enjoyed the Constitutional articles, because Mr. Henry is starting to dig into a few things. And the reason I brought this calculator, it has been working very well lately. And I thought Mr. Big Henry could help me figure out what's wrong with it. Our annual school budget is like 56 million a year. And the average cost per student is like $8-9 million a year, $8,000 a year. But when you look at the Head Start budget, which is, well, let me go back a year ago. We were debating, do we join Head Start or we don't? And I know some of you were impressed with the figures thrown. Boy is going to bring some money, and I don't know exact figure, but like 8 million to 2 million, 6 million. You remember, anybody remember that figure? $6 or $8 million. And then we're going to do such a great job that the students are going to be coming in with double this year. Well, if I take those figures, 8 million, 6 million, whichever you want to, I'm not done it, my calculation, I'll be doing correctly, because I don't know that we have 100 students in Head Start. We divide 6 million, 8 million, divide by 100, and we're spending a lot of money per student for Head Start and Early Start. Now, which one do you think we should be spending more money? People at Career Center for students, people who are going to be lawyers, people who are going to be engineers, or somebody who is taking care of children, 3-year-old, 2-month-old. So I don't think so, unless somebody can tell me what I'm doing wrong with my calculator. But now I've also been, I know it was mentioned a bit earlier, I'll repeat. Anytime you accept money for a grant, such as Head Start, there's always mandates, such as $15 an hour. They're all, and you probably read in your packet, Build Back Better, and all that. You have to follow all those mandates. And then if you look at the very, very small print, it says any future mandates. And that worries me. That really worries me. We're accepting things just because the money was there a year ago. And then the last board meeting, so I don't give, Mark, I appreciate what you did, putting on the agenda to terminate the contract. Sure later, we'll talk later, but I'll say no. I admire your guts. I just danced around in that board meeting. I just danced around it by saying we have a four more year contract. Let's not wait 4 more years, because at that time we will be term limited, there'll be new board members coming in. Let us at least be familiar with what our options are in 4 years from now. You'll have all heard me over 20 years saying that I was so pleased with Smile operating this school in my community. Not once did I see anything wrong. It was well run. I wouldn't mind them running it again until they got a little bit involved in politics. I'm sure Richard can explain. But that bothers me. I used to visit my school in Victoria at least once every month or two. I'm not going this year, I don't plan to go. But it worries me that we're spending so much money, taxpayer money. When we talk about $6-8 million to teach 100 kids or less, it's always a federal grant. But we have to come up with 25%. 25% of 8 million is $1.5 million. Now, what happens in 5 years from now? Why didn't we look at alternatives? I, and like Mark, suggested then, why don't we at least look at alternatives? I mentioned Smile, then I mentioned another one. Why don't we look at, just look, not make a motion, I'll tell you what I'm going to make a motion. Why don't we look at what they all have to offer? I was hoping at least someone was going to say, I'm going to go back on my computer and check prime time, and maybe Mr. Flores had the right idea. Now, how many of you went besides me? Then I suggested it would be a good topic to come to your education committee so that we could find out what they're doing. But I attended an education committee meeting 2 weeks ago, and let me tell you, it's the same thing, over and over. We spend too much time suspending kids, expelling kids. You remember that? There were so many consultants at the board meeting, at the education committee meeting Wednesday. I don't know where they're coming from. Some of these I did not recognize. But again, I wished that my advice had been followed. At least find out our alternatives. or get one step better, let's cancel the contract. We have 2 suits against us, but we still have a lot of money, so. Now, what could we do with that $5-6 million for our kids? I said a year ago, I'm gonna repeat. Head Start, Early Start are better handled, first of all, by your parents, and secondly, by profit or private companies. Now take that 6 for $8 million, 800. What do you think is better, the school board running it? Or you give that money to Boye Nursery School, and I think the one in St. Martin is calling something or other, I forgot which one it was. Is that? I mean, that's a lot of money, huh? With 100 kids, when my wife had a nursery school in Lafayette, she had almost 100 kids. And I tell you what, parents paid everything, there was no $1 million grant, $2 million grant, $8 million grant. So that's my point. I wish him more luck. I don't think he will succeed, but he had to start, you know. That's why I wouldn't do that.
Let me think. So need a motion? Motion?
No, I'm not gonna make a motion, I'm not gonna make a motion, just about anything else for the rest of the year.
And just to be clear, Mr. Butcher, this is for all finance committee items except for C, which was.
Yeah, except C, we move
All right?
from A to D. C, we move. We have a motion, Mr. Butcher, second, all vote.
I wanna vote yes, but all of them, but the hit, I'm all I'm doing is, no.
You should.
I just.
If there's no nay, motion carried. We only have one nay on the insert, which is item B. Going to new business. Consider approved change to the break policy for non-exempt employees. It's a proposal.
Okay, this proposal is not here tonight, so I'll handle this one. We had a policy in place from a previous administration where employees were given a half an hour for lunch and 2 15-minute breaks that were not paid. The part about 2 15-minute breaks not being paid is actually contrary to federal law, and we got a complaint from somebody that's being investigated by the labor board. So we are recommending to the board that we amend that policy and follow what the law says, which is that we guarantee employees a half an hour for lunch. And basically they're not entitled to a break. They get their half hour lunch where they don't have to work, they punch out and punch back in at the end of their half hour. And the breaks are not there because they're considered paid. So basically an 8-hour employee would be on the campus for 8.5 hours, a 7-hour employee would be on the campus for 7.5 hours. And my instructions to principals are gonna be, if they don't get a break, if they want to go get a cup of coffee, they need to go to the restroom, they can go. But we're just not a formal 15-minute break like we do.
So that's the question. You have them then punch in and punch out
For lunch.
for lunch.
And, up until now, the previous practice, they didn't punch out for breaks or for lunch. But because of our conversations with Mr. Boye, in researching the law as well as with the labor board, they should be punching in now. So we're, from policy from that moment forward, which we're asking to affirm tonight, is when they go to lunch, they punch out, when they come back, they punch back in, and we do have a record that it was an uninterrupted lunch on their own time, and that they're off the clock. So it's just basically the following.
And that's for all employees?
All exempt employees.
All non-exempt.
Non-exempt, backwards. It's as supervisors, principals, teachers, we don't fall under that law. But custodians, teacher aides, they fall under that law.
The accounting department, that's, I need that law too.
Yeah. And they don't even take.
I'm saying accounting business office.
Business office, nobody takes back in the old days, it took a 15-minute break in the morning and a 15-minute break in the afternoon. Under Mr. Laverne, they did away with that. And So there's no scheduled break. If somebody wants to go get a Coke, they walk to the machine, get them a Coke, and go back to their office. They need the restroom, they go to the restroom and come back. But we don't do a formal 15-minute break at the offices going back to probably 8 or 9 or something. But at the schools, the policy was still that they got a 15-minute break twice a day. That is not in line with federal.
But I'm gonna make a comment that I made a couple of years ago. I just hope that the employees don't put us in a bad position when they're supposed to be working, and they might be at Target, they might be at Walmart, because we pay our employees well, you know, and, you know, if that's for a private company, that's called stealing time, you know, and they need to watch this, because I see it, and me, I'm gonna report it if I see it.
If you reported one thing about.
I told them,
Check it out, yeah.
and I'm glad that the guy wasn't, or the person wasn't doing wrong, let's put it that way, and I was happy. It just didn't click, a geographic one, so, but, you know, and again, reiterate that to employees, because if I see it, that's the taxpayers' dollars, and it's wrong.
I agree.
Finish with that.
But our policy is gonna mimic federal law.
Okay, we need a motion to, for exempt employees. We have a motion by Ms. Beagle, second by Mr. Pote. I'm sure about all of them, all in favor, with. Any nays, then motion carried. And B, consider approving Harrisburg County Council recommendation. Vaccination requirement policy, new hire recommendation, program grant, and
So the second part of our policy council information that we're sharing with the board tonight has to do with the vaccine requirement that's being issued by the Head Start program standards, the new hire recommendation, which y'all approved that position, and so we did interview, advertised, policy council approved. Our recommendation was Ms. Jill Bozeman. So that is what we're asking for approval in addition to the vaccine requirement. And since the deadline that was issued for me to submit board agenda items, we actually have had a webinar that came out on Monday that kind of gave more clarification about the vaccine requirement in addition to a mask mandate for individuals ages 2 years and older. And so what I'm giving you right now kind of is information that comes directly from the interim final rule. The first part that I just gave you comes directly from the Head Start program standards, where it talks now about what masking requirement would be under 1302.47, which is masking. This is effective immediately when this was published, which actually it was draft form on the 29th, published on the 30th, which was yesterday. We sent notification home to parents along with a mask for all of the parents, for the children, letting them know that starting on Wednesday, the mask mandate would be in place for individuals ages 2 years and up. And so if you kind of look through it, it talks about what that looks like in our Head Start program and who's required to wear it, when they would not be required to wear it. And then the second part goes specifically into the vaccine requirement. On the information that you received, I gave the timeline of information that was given to us. September was when the announcement came out from the White House. Then the director of the Office of Head Start issued a letter to notification. And just recently, as the 29th, it's now been placed in the Head Start program standards about the vaccine requirement deadline of January 31st, 2022. And so when we met in Policy Council in November, we were kind of trying to navigate, were we going to adhere to the January deadline that was kind of just floating in the air, or were we going to try to do something that would allow staff members to go till the end of the year? And so at that Policy Council meeting, Policy Council representatives voted to actually not navigate anywhere beyond the January deadline that would be issued. And so just the expectation is we are currently working on what those exemption forms are going to look like. and timelines and deadlines. Our policy council meeting is December 8th, where we'll issue a policy on the COVID vaccine for staff members. And then at the January board meeting, you'll receive the policy council's recommendation for that policy. So we're kind of asking for approval that we're gonna follow the mandate. That's what policy council said with the January issue date, as well as the new hire recommendation.
Question,
Mhm.
number one, who is gonna, okay, and I did have a conversation with Mr. Boyd and Mr. Blanchard, because I'm dead set against telling people that they have to take a vaccine shot. That is that particular person's individual right. That's my opinion. Now, I've got family members that have taken it, some that have not taken it. So it's, and again, that's their choice. Okay? I don't think we should be forcing it on people because they knucklehead that we have to leave the country. That's my opinion, okay? But, and I know it's not just him. And listen, the shot has probably saved some people's lives. I will not deny it. But on the other hand, I'm sure it has killed some people too. And that I wouldn't want on anybody's conscience. That if we force that on people, that's what we're doing. That should be that particular person's individual. And that's why, that was the main reason why I put that item up on the agenda for the board members' request after a while. It was because of the vaccine mandate. Now, I did talk to Mr. Boyd, and you can probably help me out in our conversation, Mark, that, there are exemptions, religious and health. Okay? I'll tell everybody, I'm Catholic. Catholic Church is pushing for vaccine. Okay? So that would be out the window for me. But at the same time, what if I have a heart condition that I'm terrified to take that shot, because if I take that shot, it may give me a heart attack. Don't know if it will, don't know if it won't. So, who's gonna police this policy is my number one concern once it's implemented. Because if I have individual A that says that, it's gonna affect my health, and they get the doctor's excuse, is that sufficient? Or is it not sufficient? Are you gonna be policing this, or is it, who's gonna be doing it?
So what is gonna be presented to policy council on December 8th is the policy that's going to list 2 allowances for exemptions. This is what we're presenting to policy council. One of them will be the medical exemption. There is a form that has to be filled out. We're still in tentative draft forms, but it'll be a form that will filled out that is signed by a doctor, and it's the doctor's advice as to why you cannot issue it. Any staff member that is interested in providing the exemption, it'll be on a case-by-case basis that there will be an assigned committee that approves all of these exceptions. If the exception is approved, it will be documented. Based on samples and other grantees, we are going to implement a weekly testing for those that have been granted exceptions, whether it's religious or medical. Those staff members will understand if you are granted the exception, you have to participate in the weekly COVID testing to continue to stay. So those are just the 2 exceptions. That's what the medical looks like. The one person here.
I want to stop you right there. You made a comment, I want to clarify. Once that doctor fills out the form, it goes in front of your committee, and they can approve it?
The committee.
So the doctor doesn't have the final say?
The committee has to look at every exemption on a case-by-case basis to determine if it's approved or not.
If they turn down that doctor.
You're asking something, Mark, that has not happened yet.
But.
I get what you're saying, but you have to understand the world that we're in right now. Do you think that all the COVID answers are there? They're not all there. And we're doing the best that we can with what has been put in front of us to be able to continue to function in this world in the best that we can. There are, the way I see it, no right answers. There are answers. There are no right answers. There are answers. And so I can't say the what if, and we can't keep playing the what if game, because if we do that, we're a year down the road and have made no progress in whatever way it is, our progression. So all I can do is take the guidance that has been placed in front of me, find all the samples that are out there, and I have been finding them as Joe has been helping me, look at multiple ones, reach out to multiple grantees across the country and say, give me directions of where you're going in so we can best fit the needs present this to policy council in the most sincere, honest, transparent way that I can, present it to the public in that way and say, here's what we have to do, whether we agree with it or we don't agree with it. Head Start's not mandatory. It's a completely voluntary option if you choose to use this service or not. And so there are probably gonna be some families who are struggling with that requirement and opt to back out of the program. There are gonna be some who are saying, you know what, I agree with it. I think this is the right direction to provide safety for the community. I'm on board with it. You have to be able to accept, where everybody is in that. So I don't have the answers. All I can do is kind of follow guidance that other districts are doing. And it would be exceptions are granted based on the committee's recommendation of approval or not.
Something that needs in, I'm sure they have this, but if not, something that we need to consider is if the committee does go against, let's say, the doctor, that individual has the right to come in front of the board, meaning that we are in charge of it. Not that I agree with it.
I don't see why the committee would go against it.
I don't either, but what if?
Yeah, I mean,
I only have
it's
one
always
question.
possibility.
It's a form.
We look at the mandate. Okay, does the Head Start ever follow the mandate or the recommendation of the board? Say the board don't have no policy on COVID-19, or we have certain policies
Right.
we implemented last month.
Right.
But basically, that's our policy. So why do we have to follow a different policy with Head Start?
Because of the federal money that's coming in. The federal grant has said that you have to have a policy now specific to your Head Start staff. It specifically lists who's considered Head Start staff. It kind of lists if you are providing these types of services and you're in direct contact. So this document, which I have one copy, but if anybody would like the final rule, I can give it to you and make additional copies. It is the whole research of why this interim rule was kind of put in place. And so that's what's guiding their decisions in what they made. They looked at statistics. They looked at ratios of how many centers were closed, the ratios of who contracted COVID, the actual estimated cost for volunteers not being in the center, for centers being closed. So there's, all of that is listed in this document for anybody who would like to read it.
Very good. You got your information.
Trying.
Yeah, you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Is there any more questions?
So the mask mandate is individuals 2 and up are required to wear the mask in indoor setting, or in a crowded outdoor setting. There's some specific guidelines. If you look at the page, it'll say 2 or more individuals in a vehicle owned, indoors in a setting where Head Start services are provided. For those not fully vaccinated, if you're outdoors in a crowded setting or during activities that involve sustained close contact, the exceptions, or if you have a disability that's defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act, children when they're napping, children and adults when they're eating or drinking. And if children have special needs, a doctor, but according to the doctor's advice, can issue an alternative to the face mask, if it would be a face shield due to an asthma or one thing. So the other thing that we've done just to try to be proactive is we have extra masks that we keep. So if a parent does drop off a child in the morning without the mask, we have another mask that we issue. We also have disposable masks so that if children drop their mask, sneeze in their mask, get their mask where it's not really good to be wearing it again, we can supply another mask.
That's a lot of work.
And we are, I'm gonna tell you, I don't think there's anybody in the room that understands the difficulty of a 2-year-old wearing a mask more than me, who's kind of lived it. So just to understand, we are not, we're not on the cheerleader for it or the cheerleader against it, and we know we're not going into battles with children. We're gonna model the appropriate behavior of how to wear the mask, and that's how we're kind of approaching it. We are gonna adhere to the expectation, but we're also gonna know that it's our job when we're teaching our 2-year-olds how to walk in line, how to wash their hands correctly. Now part of this is teaching them how to properly wear a mask.
Pertaining to the actual virus, have you operate in the Head Start program?
I have not done statistically research data on it. We have had centers that have closed because of suspected cases and positive cases. So it has not affected our Head Start centers. We have had
Mr.
that.
P have a question, if you don't mind. Mr. P.
How will this affect me and my man?
So because you're not providing direct services to the children and you're providing services to the facility, you are not included in this requirement.
Okay. Need a motion? Motion. Motion by Ms. B. Dawson. Second by Ms. Johnson. All in favor? Vote. I vote no.
Yeah.
And they vote carry. Two nays, Mark, and this is.
I will no.
I vote no carry. And Steph. Moving on to the next item. Discuss the PM issue. That's Mr. Knight.
Okay, you skip on
C.
Right. See. And, oh, I'm sorry. Consider approve contract policy 360 policy update to post office consultants incorporated.
That's a renewal of our, that's the company that maintains our policies and updates them. We've had this for quite a number of years, as long as I can remember, it's just an annual review. They did go up $200 from last year, but we're recommending approval. Somebody has to do it, and they do it for most districts.
I just have one comment, or stick to my comment I make every year. I think we're paying for a service that we as school board members get from the Louisiana School Board Association. Because they give us the same amount of information every year, and then this guy, all he does is copy whatever we get from the school board association.
You vote right. That's done that. You agree?
They write it in, they think the legislation requires it.
And listen, you just, the information, you all get the packets from the Louisiana School Board Association. And then this guy comes back right behind it and just,
Or we get it in the form of, with the legislation, he writes it as a form of policy.
And we have to watch him because one thing that always pops up in my mind is years ago, and this is probably right after I finished high school, so that's how long ago. I want to say Chester Cedars and a group of individuals came up with our drug policy for athletes. And it's a specific policy. And I want to say when this guy started, he pretty much waived that policy or he adjusted it somehow. So we need to keep on kind of track, in case, because that, from what I understand, that was pretty much back then for the athletes. So just something to think.
You have somebody that can write a policy?
Well, no, you got attorneys to look it over. Basically, what said, that they copy the policy.
But they take the legislation, they take the law and they write it in the form of a policy. And we present it to the board in the form of adoption, and they put it in the policy manual and they place it in language.
You can mark it that,
No.
We had that discussion before, his response has been.
And I don't know that I could do it, keep it in the picture.
Just at your wish, but your wish.
My recommendation is to renew.
motion to accept.
Motion by Mr. Forte, second by Mr. Clay, all in favor, vote, show your liberty. Is there any nay? Then motion. Mr. Knott,
Yes.
no, I'm talking about, you got an item on the board. I know you discussed that one,
No, this is one.
discuss the appeal issue.
6A.
Teresa D. Thomas versus San Juan Parish School Board. Mr. Knott.
I didn't hear.
Number 6A on your agenda.
I thought you said, I think that all turns to discuss it.
Oh,
okay, well, I thought.
But that's some action you take it.
All right. Quicker on thought. Anyhow, when there is something that's a little semi-controversial, I generally type my notes because sometimes you misquote me. So I can have it, I can always go back. And my memory is fairly good, I'm gonna have two things. But one particular item that we go back years and years is when we, this board, we put on the agenda item that in order to make sure that we think about something before we vote, we, make sure that board members will introduce an item and for the next board meeting. And then part of our discussion, we said, well, sometimes the administration has something very pressing to put on the agenda. So we allow the administration to put an item and when it was pressing, to vote the same night. But over the years, some of us have forgotten and we just allow any item by the administration to vote on. I have no problem with that. But anyhow, I was kind of busy today, a lot of determined to do and real estate and all that stuff. So I rushed and typed my notes really quickly. And then, if in case I say something that's wrong, I can always correct it, all right? So here goes. After last board meeting, as I was leaving, my friends from Caterpillar asked me about the appeal of Thomas versus School Board. And my comment, as usual, I say that on the phone often, do you want me to lie and make you feel happy? Or tell the truth? Well, there was a little laughter. And one of the ladies said, well, we know you, you tell it like it is. Give us your opinion of the appeal. Now, here is my basically summary of what we said. Well, it's going to, I didn't want to lie. It's going to take, we've been in this thing now for 6 years. We filed an appeal 6 years ago. So at the rate we're going, probably, and we have half of the components done, my guess is 6 more years. But I believe that in 5 years from now, before this thing is settled, no board member sitting here would be involved because we're all to the point where we got only around 1 more time. And so I would like to see to it that we settle it before 4 years. So, but there may be a delay because of that. And okay, now I told them that I will start putting things on the agenda so that we can try and keep them informed. And I decided on this particular one, I decided to discuss legal issues. Attorneys. The topic of course is the legal. Now, at the last board meeting, when you were there, we did not increase the legal fees by our current team, although they've been serving us for 6 or more years. Now, basically, unanimous, no increase in fees. Well, when my doctor asked me, or my mechanic asked me for fee increases, I generally agree. You know, good service. And I'm not giving any reason why. So, now, I will not be critical of our legal team, so there's no sense in discussing this in executive session. But some action should be taken by the board and administration if we are to succeed and speed up the process. My opinion is that the board should we could drop the appeal to speed up the process, or we can give the legal team some help. All right? I prefer the latter. Let us help our legal team instead of dropping the appeal. Now, how do we help? Now, again, in my opinion, I think that we should contact a Washington-based legal team to help in the appeal and let the current legal team concentrate on the remaining 4 components that are still unresolved. Now, surely the board president or the superintendent can recommend such a firm with an address that says Washington DC, experience in appeals. That goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And if they can't think of anyone, they can always contact Senator Kennedy or Higgins, who was at one time volunteered to contact a firm that I suggested. Now, I know some board members, I can name them. I know the first thing they would say is, we cannot afford the additional expense. Mr. Henry has discussed our legal expenses over the years, over $1 million. But let me remind this board that 2 board meetings ago, we voted to spend over $100,000 for a 1-year contract for them to tell us that we need to ease up suspensions and expulsions. I was the only one who voted against that contract. I think it's worthless. And again, I mentioned coming in a meeting 2 Wednesdays ago, there were so many consultants all telling us that we spend too much time on suspensions and expulsions. And that is not that difficult. What about all the other components? Will we appoint another contractor for $100,000, $200,000? And we keep on dragging it and putting money on consultants. And if you hear TV once in a while, board members elsewhere are being sued because of, as an example, suppose we start on curriculum, they start suggesting, or somebody starts just suggesting such things as critical race theory. Will we listen? Now, I was so proud of one of the principals that, no, not principal. A parent called me a couple of weeks ago, and I was so proud of the principal. The principal actually, after listening to those consultants, actually suspended a kid because the cell phone in a bag right. Now, according to our consultant, that's an easy thing, just a kid, they leave that thing home. But we all have it. Mine has gone off. Was it worth suspending? And no. But actually, the principal said that's our policy. We have to follow policy. If you want me to be easy up on suspension and don't ever send a kid to a JSEP, fine. But change the policy. All right. So anyhow. Now, discipline. Why do you think, if you look at all the teachers that are leaving this parish, why are they leaving? Because of poor pay or because of poor discipline? Think about it. Why are students leaving? When we first came on board, Frederick and I and Richard, 10,000 kids. Now we're down to maybe, I don't know the numbers, I haven't received yet for October, but probably approaching 7,000. But people are moving this back. Why are they? Why are kids not coming? Is it because of homeschool? Is it because of poor discipline in our school? So, okay. Now, in my opinion, I think we should aggressively pursue the appeal of the court's decision by adding a Washington-based legal team to work with our current legal team and fight all the way to the Supreme Court, or we should just drop the appeal and listen to our. So anyhow, now some of you may have a better idea. Fine. Place them on the agenda if you have a better idea. January. I will listen to your suggestion. But the choice is clear. Either file the appeal or drop it. If we file the appeal, don't send our legal team with the top gun. Send them with All right? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'm not gonna make a motion.
All right, that's on call, discussion. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. My, motion, I have an item on the agenda, the reason why I put discuss and approve, because we've discussed this several times about Head Start, so it's not the first time that we're discussing it. Just want to clarify, the policy. Ms. Nicole, I have a question. Mr. Knott was bringing up some dollar amounts earlier about the number of kids. Is the Head Start based just like the MFP is for the regular, or do you just get a block grant for the money? And the reason why I'm asking that, because from my understanding, we have a lot of openings throughout the parish, probably over 150 openings.
Well, I didn't have the figures.
Right, and that's why I'm asking, I don't know,
So I just,
do we get, is it like, is it treated like MFP per individual student, or do we just get a big block of money?
So you get a block of money, and when you submit the application, it is based on how many children you are projecting to serve in certain locations. What you do is, you look at your entire cost that you would need to actually run this program. So you look at how many teachers you would need, how many administrators you would need, cost for facility, lease, rental, insurance. You look on, if you are going to have transportation costs. You look at supplies. All of those things are factored in. Then what you do is, once you figure out what your total amount would be for that many people at those salaries, you take that amount, and if for us, we projected that we would serve 416 early Head Start students, you kind of divide your lump sum and you request funds both for early Head Start and Head Start separate from each other. And then it shows you based on an allocation per child, but that's not how you get, they look at it that way, but it's a block amount. You just have to do a cost allocation plan that kind of breaks it down into that category.
So you're basically saying that we based it off of 416 kids.
416, 312 Head Start and 104 early Head Start.
I mean, do you have?
Currently, right now, we're servicing, about 234 students. Our early Head Start program is full, with about 74 kids on the wait list that we are not able to serve. And our Head Start, we have about 14 kids on our Head Start that we are transitioning in. So our early Head Start is at capacity. Our Head Start is not at capacity. We do have some openings. That's what's great about the Head Start, early Head Start program. You do a self-assessment at the end of the year. You see where your need is. It's obvious our need is in the early Head Start realm, so you make an adjustment and a projection when you put your application saying, we want to adjust, and instead of serving 312 Head Start 3 and 4-year-olds, we're going to reduce the number of 3 and 4-year-olds we're serving, and we're going to increase the number of 0 to 2 because that's where the need is. You adjust that, you recalculate your cost allocation plan.
This year, though, that we didn't meet that 416,
So we are still right now.
or shall I say penalized?
What you do is you get flagged, and this is starting in January of 2022. When we do our monthly attendance enrollment that we turn in, if you are not at your full enrollment, it kind of gets a flag. After 3 months, they will contact you and say, what is your action plan for you to increase your enrollment? Action plans usually involve increased recruiting events, increased advertising, those types of things. Right now, because of COVID, pretty much every grantee is under enrolled because of just everything that has kind of happened. We are at a much higher enrollment than Head Start has been in years.
So my.
That Huron Head Start has more children than it is probably
So the
ever had.
openings are probably over 150 openings that we probably have.
About.
So, in my opinion, Head Start has its, I just think Head Start is doing things the wrong way. I don't care what they call it. Until they address the dollars to get these parents held accountable at home, I don't see much changing. Because when you're gonna have parents that are held responsible for their children to raise them the correct way, and what's the correct way nowadays? Who knows? But at least be there for your kids, then nothing's gonna change. It's that our scores will not go up because of Head Start. I just don't see it happen. Until that parent, if my child isn't going to school, and the DA's office comes to my house and says, if you don't send your kid to school, you're going to jail. Things like that, and start holding people accountable, but it won't happen, because it's the way that the world is nowadays. But that's the main reason why I put it on the agenda to remove the contract is simply that a lot of it was based off of the vaccination shot. If we're forcing people to do this, which I don't agree with, then I don't think we should even, I mean, look how much, and I'm not gonna, look how much attention you have to give Head Start compared to your regular pre-K classes.
And that is why
You
I,
probably doubled your,
but I am not up here asking to reduce
No, I'm
the
just
Head Start program, nor have, what I have done is looked at this as a whole and said, where their funding is, my salary now portionally comes from Head Start, it released funding somewhere else, so that I will hire an additional person to support those types of things. So in no way has the early childhood department gone down. Matter of fact, it has gone up, and when performance profile, we are releasing those, which we have had some decline, but what we're seeing currently this year in the class observation scores, we've seen an increase in that. So that really hasn't, and I just kind of want to reflect, because I did pull some data for you, Mark, reference to the vaccine requirement, and I get it 100%, but what I want you to know is,
nothing against you.
I know that, and I'm not taking it personally, it's just my job to have the facts and the data and present it as is. Of the 65 staff members that are currently employed with Head Start, 83% of them are already vaccinated without this kind of thing in place. There's about 17% that are not. Of that 17%, about 6% are probably gonna request an exemption. There's about 11% that don't have the exemption. We're targeted to lose about 4 staff members, which is 6% because of the vaccine, versus when this is all said and done, about 95% of them are vaccinated and did it
And that's
because of
listen,
their own
that's-
personal choice
that's
prior
their
to
choice.
this.
That's
So I'm
correct.
just saying, we are in this area, this community has probably embraced the vaccine in a higher percentage than I think some other grantees are facing.
I just
And
feel the
so-
way Head Start is set up, it's mismanaged and it misuses public funds. That's my opinion. So I have a motion on the floor to cancel the contract. All I need is a second to get a vote.
I would like to say something before.
Sure, go ahead.
I haven't been involved with Head Start long enough to give a good opinion. But after talking to several principals over the years and the need for it, when we decided to take it over, everybody was of the opinion that by starting those kids in our control, in our schools, they would have a better footing when they got into pre-K and kindergarten. I think it's too early to just jump and say it's not doing them any good, because for what I'm seeing, it's doing them a lot of good. The kids I've seen that have gone there are learning early how to handle things which they are not getting at home. And you mentioned that. Home is not the place, because most of them have a single parent home. The only thing I would like to see is that Head Start and early start get the permission to accept all kids like we do. In other words, not just the lower, not just the lower kids, but all of the kids, because it's not just the least disadvantaged kids that need, then all of the kids are needing it now. And I think we did a good thing when we took it on.
I think so too.
And I think the people that we have on staff and the people running it are doing a super job. And I think after we see this 2 or 3 years down the road, I think we're gonna see the good it's gonna be doing for us. And I think it's gonna help our schools. Because if you look at all the studies on kids, it's when they're the youngest that they can learn the most.
Brain growth.
Right.
Is in that
And if we can get them there and get them started on learning, like, you know, I'm just saying this because this is something I experienced. My great granddaughter is in it, in a situation like that, and she comes and she's reciting numbers, alphabets, all this kind of stuff at 2 years old. Stuff that she wouldn't get if she was just staying at home. Because the parent works, this one works, they don't have time to do that. They're in an educational little situation when they go to the Head Start. So they're groomed into learning. They're groomed into, being polite, accepting other people, you know, all this kind of stuff. I can't see anything but positive. That's my opinion. So I would like to see them take in more kids instead of less, or getting rid of it. Because I think now that we have control of it, I think we can do something.
You get a second?
Yeah, we
don't
don't the last second.
You have a second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Hebert, second by Mr. Skelly, and that would be to cancel the contract with the federal mandate of Head Start. Vote. You vote yes if you want to cancel, no if you don't want.
I don't want to cancel it. Take money.
Okay. Okay, so motion failed. We'll go back to the executive session. Motion on this 14th segment, Steve. All in favor? Aye. No, nay.
Mr. Steve, I'm gonna have Mr. Blanchard call you in executive session, since we can't put you on this, on there, okay? You're welcome.